Now, the managing editor of Newsweek, John Meacham. Good morning, Mr. Meacham.
Good morning, Mr. Imus.
How are you?
I've had better weeks.
So, you're the managing editor, right?
I am.
What do you do?
Well, I'm the number 2 day-to-day guy on scene there.
Who's the number 1 day-to-day guy?
Mark Whitaker.
Whitaker.
And then Rick Smith.
What does he do?
Well, Rick is at this point, I think, damn near the longest-serving news magazine editor since Henry Luce. He's been at the top level for about 35 years, and he is an interesting combination. He essentially marries both church and state for us. He is the chairman, so he runs the business side, and he also, because he came from the editorial side, oversees us and weighs in on the cover and on big issues, and is really the guy in charge.
Okay, but while he weighs in on the cover and other things, is he there in the trenches day to day?
No, he's not reading. Well, if the question is he reading every line of copy? No, that's what.
Obviously, nobody is over there. We know that now.
Well, you're complaining there are too many editors. There were too few editors last week, so you got to keep the goalposts in one place. He's the boss. He's sort of like it's a little strange in terms of an analogy because Don Graham is the owner of the company. But it's a little like the New York Times, where you have a publisher who actually is in charge of everything, and then you have an editor and a managing editor who read all the copy, get things done.
Did this item in as it originally appeared in the Periscope page of your magazine, did it say that y'all were gonna that there was this source, well, you guys had sources, but this source said that there was going to be a government document that suggested that they had flushed a Koran down a toilet?
Yes, but that allegation was expected to be in that Southcom report. Okay,
because then I noticed in can't think, Jonathan Alder's column, he says that the item was that he characterized it as trying to flush I realize this is a small point, but he had it that the item was that they were trying to flush the Koran down the toilet. I just wondered if you all were straight on whether the original part was they did flush it or that they were trying to flush it.
Well, the original item said flushed. And
where did Alder get his information and that they were trying to flush it?
Alder may have. That's. I need to go back and talk to John about it. But I think the key thing is we reported wrongly. We made a mistake.
Right.
That a Koran ended up in a toilet as an attempt to rattle the suspects or the detainees, and we just didn't have enough to go with, and we were wrong, and there's, mistakes are things you just got to acknowledge and try to fix and move forward, and none of us want to be defensive about this. None of us are in any way trying to minimize the seriousness of it. Every word that goes in that magazine has to be as true and verifiable as we can possibly make it. And it seems obvious to say, but sometimes you got to say the obvious. And we screwed up in this case, and we're now going to do everything we can to get things right. Again, stating the obvious. And
a couple of fundamental things I'm sort of wondering about. Not being a journalist, I nevertheless I'm a consumer of journalism. And the question's been asked, well, Bernard, and then Pat Buchanan, a bunch of other people have asked the question, and I'm going to ask you, what is the point in a time of war of publishing what seems like sort of a story that's been out there anyway, that, the Washington Post had some alluded to desecration of the Quran and these various facilities. But what's the point of, particularly with an item that wasn't nailed down, and y'all had to know that? I mean, somebody over there had to know that this thing wasn't really just absolutely nailed down. What's the point of publishing this anyway?
Well, in any time of war, time of peace, our job is to try to keep our government, our military, people who are acting in our name, who are sacrificing, who are doing incredible work under incredibly difficult circumstances. Our job is to keep an eye on what is going on. I mean, that's what the press does. We are part of this democratic process. We cannot be mindlessly adversarial, which I'm afraid has happened in a lot of different places. I frankly don't think I know it's not true at Newsweek, but that there is this kind of automatic assumption of hostility between the government and the press. But the point of reporting on these things is to try to keep people from doing bad things, because sunshine helps these things. When you point out mistakes, they tend not to get made again. See this case in Newsweek. And to say that, well, you shouldn't report on it, on an important thing like Quranic desecration or the allegations of it, because other people have already reported on it, is sort of mixing the argument up a good bit. And what we were trying to do in this item is say, look, we have problems. We have had problems from Abu Ghraib forward with prisoner detention. Obviously, these people are not in these places because they've done great things in society, the prisoners, the detainees. But at the same time, we have to be incredibly sensitive about not inflaming what is already a terribly inflammatory situation, which was not one of our own making. Before September 11th, we did not invite this. This was brought on us as an act of war by extremists in the Islamic faith. So we have been put in this position. This is not, as the president brilliantly said at the National Cathedral on the Friday after the attacks, this war began at a time of their choosing. It will end on our terms at a time when we pick. We have to hold everybody accountable for what's going on so that it won't get even worse. That's the answer.
Yeah, I tend to. It's not important what I think, or not really important, but I tend to agree with you. But I do, and hindsight is enormously helpful in my asking these various questions. But it does seem to me, and just trying to think about it without trying to cause trouble or to make your life miserable, that it seemed just on the surface to be fairly flimsy to me, and somebody over there had to recognize that in order to make this sort of charge, that it would have been better to have it really nailed down, and somebody had to anticipate that it might inflame these folks. And
we could not agree more. What you just said is right. We were wrong. We screwed this up. It was not up to standard. That conversation about sensitivities should have happened. It didn't. We made a mistake. It was used.
Is that all of this is a mistake? Is not.
I'm just telling you. All I can tell you is the truth.
Yeah.
And this was a bad mistake, and we're sorry. What you've seen in the magazine this week, what you've heard all last week from John and Howard talking to you a week ago, all the way forward, is a well-meaning, well-intentioned institution that's been doing this for 72 years, trying to make sure we get it right. And I cannot tell you how seriously we take the fact that we are read around the world, that we're read around the country. 3.2 million people subscribe. Those are hugely important people to us.
It's a top 10 magazine. Of course, you obviously know that, being the managing editor.
Well, I just want this very important. I really believe in a very serious way that we are a vital part of the life of the nation, that that these big...
Let's not get crazy here.
No, you've asked serious questions, so let me answer you seriously for 1 minute.
All right.
That we are an important thing. You and I would not be talking about this if we weren't important. This doesn't have anything to do with me. This has to do with Newsweek.
Yeah, I understand.
And all we can do is say we were wrong. I mean, other institutions, other people throughout history have had an inability to admit that they were wrong and that they were going to try to get it right going forward. We are not going to make that mistake. We're not going to compound the mistake. All we can do, all common sense tells you can do, is say, this wasn't where it should have been. We shouldn't have published it at that point. It doesn't mean we're giving up the pursuit of strong, dogged, tough reporting at all, but it's going to be triple riveted, quadruple riveted going forward, as it has been in the past.
You know who Isikoff's source was?
I know roughly.
Do you know the person's name?
I don't want to get into that, if you don't mind. The source...
In other words, you do.
The source has been historically reliable. And
I wish you were here because Charles and I would make you tell us. Because we'd beat the hell out of you and get it out of you.
I know, but actually you're too gentlemanly. I know you hide behind. You hide behind this. Ultimately, your grace would win out.
Did you read Time Magazine's account of what y'all did?
I did.
What'd you think of that?
I did. We are the story of the moment, and you cannot be. I want to go back to this slightly self-flagellating pose for a second, because it's true. We take on the whole world every week. We write about institutions, we write about people, we write about books, we write about political campaigns, and whenever you're in the position of actually being written about, as you know, you always look at the thing and say, my God, here are the 16 things I would have done differently. Here are the 17 nuances they got wrong. I'm not saying this is true about Time, but obviously we are the story right now, and we obviously report on everybody else, and so we have to take it here. One thing, again, not to be too gooey about it, that I think is really important, and I thought was really important before this, and have written some about it, is we would all do a lot better if there were a larger measure of empathy in the culture right now. Not sort of rolling over for everybody or each other or back scratching, but just understanding that everybody is working through what the great 19th century novelist George Eliot said, dim lights and tangled circumstance. We're all trying really hard to get it right, to do whatever job we're doing, and in real time. And that includes the President of the United States, and that includes the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and that includes the editors of Newsweek, and that includes the soldiers on the ground. And the more empathetic and I think even magnanimous we can be, the better off the whole country's going to be.
I think most people probably think that Newsweek was trying to do the right thing. You can have the discussion, which we've already had, about whether it should have been written about in the first place. You explained that rather eloquently. However, this incident got unfairly compared, as you obviously know, to the Jason Blair situation, the clown at the USA Today, the CBS News deal, and a couple other instances, which was unfortunate. And so, while I agree we all ought to have more empathy, the problem is that the general public doesn't pay as close attention to this stuff as perhaps you and I do, or Charles, or the rest of us, lumps all of these things in together.
Yeah.
And so you'll come off looking like Jason Blair when that's just not the case. So.
That's right. I call it the lazy roundup paragraph problem, where people are going to say, well, here are the 5 screw-ups recently in the media, boom, 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 boom. And the only thing I can do about that is push hard at Newsweek, which is the only place I have any place to work, and try to avoid that. Try to say, when somebody says, hey, isn't this news story just like what happened to X? Say, well, maybe, maybe not. We just got to get those nuances right. And if anything, we have learned anew that, lazy roundup paragraphs, hey, here's a trend in the media. Hey, here's a trend in prisoner tactics. Hey, here's a trend in how we're fighting in Iraq. And being careful not to do the lazy trend story. And the papers are full of these. Magazines are full of these because people are always trying to spot something larger in the smaller things. There's a whole industry, including our magazine, that could fall back on that instinct of wanting to appear very wise and as though whichever journalist could connect dots that other people couldn't connect, which of course they can. And as you're saying, maybe they're dots that shouldn't be connected. So this is a case not only for empathy, you're exactly right, but just for more exactitude. Because as you know, when you're written about, when you're in the news, suddenly you see the world a whole lot differently. And you realize that life is not clinical, and we're not all sitting on Olympus sort of passing judgment, oh, X is true and Y is not true. That we're all not only A, in this together by and large, but B, good journalism is when you hold up a mirror to the country and the reflection is accurate. And if it's inaccurate, then we're in trouble.
I'm not as concerned about, items, for example, written about me or items that Newsweek writes about somebody else, if they get some of the, if they make some honest mistakes. But when mistakes are made that suggest that the original motive was some sort of agenda, that's what I find troubling. And I think in some quarters that was the suspicion regarding not just Newsweek, but the rest of the, what's unfairly or maybe accurately described as a liberal news media, is that there is an agenda there, and that this is just another example of that. But that isn't, and I don't know whether I think that or not.
I'll tell you what I think, which is that right now, I know a lot of people think there is a liberal media that comes out of really the Nixon years. But if you talk to a whole lot of liberals, they think we're in the pocket of the right wing. So both sides at this point, in this incredibly divisive moment, think that the mainstream press is somehow or another tacking one way or the other. It sort of drives me crazy because all we're trying to do, and we didn't do it in this case, but all we're trying to do is find out the facts and tell the truth as best we can see it. Philip Graham, who bought Newsweek and made it part of the Washington Post company, said that journalism is the first rough draft of history. Sometimes you wish it weren't quite so rough some weeks, but that's what we're doing. And it's not, all I can speak for passionately is Newsweek. We are not part of any liberal media agenda. We are not part of any conservative media agenda. People who are whacking Michael Isikoff around on the right, who say he's a liberal journalist who's trying to make America look bad, seem to have forgotten that this is a guy who basically impeached Bill Clinton 7 years ago. Mike gave the right wing the best years of their life in the past 10 years or so. And that was simply Mike chasing the facts as best he could find them. And in one case, it led to the impeachment of a Democratic incumbent president. In other cases, maybe it's made Republicans uncomfortable. But he's doing what we should do at our best, which is simply trying to find out the truth, trying to hold up a mirror, trying to shed light, trying to keep the government accountable, whoever it is. Because if you get too clubby, the other side of the empathy is the famous case with Scotty Reston, the legendary Washington bureau chief of the New York Times, and JFK, who, Reston had the Bay of Pigs story in '61, and Kennedy asked him to hold it, and Scotty held it, and Kennedy later told him, that was the dumbest thing I've ever done because you should have run it, because then I wouldn't have gotten into this mess. So, that's a true and fascinating episode. So we are a fallible human institution. You actually know a whole lot more of us better than almost anybody outside the magazine. You know Feynman, you know John, you know Evan. You know, we're, I hate to say it, but these are really good, honest, decent, hardworking, wonderful people.
I agree.
And we're not crazy liberals. We're not nutty conservatives.
Well, I don't know about that. You know, I do think of you every Sunday morning when I drive by the Episcopalian Church down in Southport and try to run over people. Although there are fewer and fewer parishioners, I notice, so not that many opportunities.
You know, it's really not fair to try to run over people who are hungover. You know, you of all people should have sympathy.
Fairly eloquent defense of, if it's necessary at this point, of your magazine. I think you'll probably be fine. Big old wet kiss from Frank Khrushchev. So what the hell is he trying to do? He's trying to get a job over there. So.
Well, you know, David Brooks.
That's a great column from Brooks.
That was a great column. I called him up and said I'd come down and cut his grass for him.
Yeah, that was good. All right, man. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you very much.
John Meacham, the managing editor from Newsweek magazine.